We are going to make sure the Iranians aren't able to buy conventional weapons.
Because I'm not like Kerry, who signed the worst deal, the Iran deal, which was such a disaster. The deal that President Obama made was a horror show, the Iran nuclear deal. They staged terror all over the world. And they had 14 or 15 sites where there was nothing but war, problems. Every single one of those sites was instigated by Iran. We do not seek regime change. We have the strongest military in the world.
Anyone conducting business with Iranian entities should exercise extreme caution to ensure that they are not working with the IRGC and get back to doing what Iran needs to do, which is to take care of its own people in this very difficult time.
This is the Real News Network. Although Iran is among the worst affected countries in the world by COVID-19, the United States is not relenting on its sanctions. After withdrawing from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, known as the JCPA, more commonly known as the Iran nuclear deal, Trump has intensified pressure on the Islamic Republic and has given it no incentive to give up its nuclear program. In fact, whenever the United States further violated the JPCA, Iran retaliated by exceeding the amounts of radioactive materials which it enriches for the purpose of generating nuclear power, but possibly for developing nuclear weapons in the future. Dr. Trita Parsi, president of the National Iranian-American Council, spoke with the Real News last year about the repercussions of that withdrawal.
What they're saying now is that they're going to do away with some of those limitations as a result of the fact that the Trump administration has betrayed the agreement, walked out of the agreement more than a year ago, and is actually punishing countries for abiding by this agreement. And this has created a bizarre situation in which Iran is actually under more sanctions now when it actually is adhering to an international nuclear agreement than it was years ago when it was accused by the United States of having violated one. So it was very clear from the outset that this was not going to be a sustainable situation. Iran cannot alone live up to this agreement while the United States is out of it and the Europeans are doing far too little to make sure that they're living up to it.
On January 3rd, the United States committed an unprovoked act of war against Iran, the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, a senior Iranian military commander. While the Iranian government chose to show restraint and didn't succumb to the provocation, the political stability in neighboring Iraq has collapsed, and the pro-U.S. government lost control of the population. Professor Sabah al-Nassari of York University explained to the Real News earlier this year how the assassination of Soleimani destabilized Iraq.
The Iranian regime feared that this revolution in Iraq could spill over to Iran and threaten the regime itself. So it has to get rid of the or to oppress or put down the revolution in Iraq. And they tried. And especially Qasem Soleimani was in charge of this file. They used snipers and kidnappers and killers and intimidation and so on. It didn't work. They wanted to militarize the revolution, just like in Syria or Yemen and so on. It didn't work too because people were peaceful. And then what they tried is they tried to impose, after the resignation of the government of Adel Abdel Mahdi, they tried to impose a new a prime minister from Tahaluf al-Bina, which is al-Bina bloc with the pro-Iran Shia political parties and their armed militias. They wanted to impose their candidate with the help of Soleimani on the president of Iraq by all means and contra to people's demands to ensure that the influence in Iran will stay, and then through this new government, with a new minister president, they could put down the revolution. But it didn't work too. So they moved to the third steps, which is to escalate the conflict with the U.S. by attacking some military bases in the U.S. or by attacking the U.S. embassy to drag the United States into actually a military confrontation.
The mayor of Tehran, Piruz Hanachi, warned that as thousands of Iranians died of COVID-19, medicine and protective gear could not be imported because of the United States sanctions. In fact, it seems that the U.S. is exploiting the pandemic to intensify sanctions against the Islamic Republic. The Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Javad Zarif, responded to the sanctions.
Amid this pandemic, the U.S. government has vengefully refused to lift its unlawful and collective punishment, making it virtually impossible for us to even buy medicine and medical equipment.
The U.S. and its regional allies, Israel and Saudi Arabia, have been following a strategy of maximum pressure on Iran, which is based on the logic that if Iranians suffer enough, they will overthrow their government and surrender to the dominance of the U.S., Israel, and Saudi Arabia. How do such crazy ideas make their way to official government institutions? One channel is the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Here is what Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson told The Real News last year about this maximum pressure strategy.
These are just very stupid moves, and they're aimed at one thing and one thing only. And that is so contracting the contacts that Iran has with the world and that we have with Iran that we wind up bringing the regime down, if for no other reason, just for the fact that it can't function in the world. Now, that's the purpose of them. There is a repercussion of this, though, that we've seen before, and we're going to see again in Iran, I suspect, and that is that the people we are actually sanctioning, the organizations we're actually sanctioning, get richer, get more powerful because of the sanctions.
Former National Security Advisor John Bolton brought the Foundation for Defense of Democracies into the Trump administration by appointing Richard Goldberg to serve as senior advisor to the National Security Council. The Foundation for Defense of Democracies is a neoconservative think tank funded by pro-Israeli billionaires promoting Islamophobic messages and advocating for military action against Iran, Lebanon, and the Palestinians. It also spread conspiracy theories against Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, but quickly deleted that post later. When Qasem Soleimani was assassinated, that foundation rejoiced. One of their reports contributed to making the decision to kill him. And now to step up the pressure, the United States is using intimidation rather than cooperation to establish a global arms embargo against Iran, while U.S. allies in the region buy record amounts of arms. Here is Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
Iran's ability to purchase conventional weapon systems starting on October 23rd of this year in the absence of action. We're not going to let that happen. Does anybody think that the nation that today is conducting terror campaigns by Lebanese Hezbollah or Iraqi Shia movements or firing military missiles into the air ought to be permitted to purchase conventional weapon systems in just a few months? I think the world realizes that's a mistake. We'll work with the UN Security Council to extend that prohibition on those arms sales. And then in the event we can't get anyone else to act, the United States is evaluating every possibility about how we might do that.
Interestingly enough, in order to claim the right to impose an arms embargo on Iran, Pompeo now claims that the United States is still in the JCPOA, despite withdrawing in 2008. Here is a brief segment from the AIPAC video, which was made to convince congresspeople to extend and intensify the embargo of Iran.
In 2010, the United Nations Security Council approved an arms embargo on Iran, making it illegal under international law for the regime to import and export weapons. But on October 18, 2020, as a provision of the Iran nuclear deal, the UN arms embargo on Iran will be lifted, and the world's leading sponsor of terrorism will be able to buy and sell weapons. The UN also imposes travel restrictions on key Iranian officials, including Qasem Soleimani, the commander of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, also known as the IRGC.
For The Real News, this is Mark Steiner.